if you stop and really stare at a ticking clock on the wall for long enough, you start to realize just how deeply we take it for granted.
Oh, absolutely. We treat it like it's just there.
Right. We treat time as this like passive background radiation of our lives. It's just the river we're all floating down together,
Right.
Completely at the mercy of the current. It just sort of exists.
Yeah, exactly. We view chronology as a natural law. It's something we observe rather than something we actively participate in or manipulate.
But then you step into the world of our source material today, and suddenly that river is a
A
battlefield.
total war zone. Yeah.
The clock is no longer just, measuring your day. It is framed as a literal weapon that was specifically forged by human hands to carve up reality and bend it to our will. And I see you've actually brought out the visual aids for this one.
I had to.
Your background is covered in like ancient astrolabes, Roman sundials, ticking analog clocks, which is just incredibly fitting for where we are about to go today.
I really felt it was necessary. I mean, when you dive into a text that fundamentally deconstructs how we perceive the passing of seconds and minutes, having the physical artifacts of that history staring back at you, it really sets the tone.
It absolutely does, because today we are doing a deep dive into an explosive new 2025 release. It's an ebook titled Time, Its Tides and Traditions, a macho guy by Conrad Riker.
And it is a dense read.
Super dense. And look, before we plunge into this, I need to tell you, make sure to like and subscribe to the show right now.
Please do.
And if today's topic grabbed you, and trust me, it is designed to grab you by the collar, you can buy the ebook we are reviewing today on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books.
I highly recommend checking out the source material for yourself.
Right. Now, I want to be entirely upfront about who this book is speaking to and what we're actually doing here. This deep dive is specifically tailored for listeners interested in the men's rights movement, the manosphere, and those seeking a decidedly red-pilled perspective on modern society.
That is definitely the target demographic.
Yeah. Our goal today is to give you an ultra-long, incisive, and fascinating breakdown of Riker's core argument. Basically, that our foundational institutions were historically built by men, and how, in his view, they have since been captured by feminists and Marxists.
Yeah.
We're looking at the history of these institutions before that alleged capture.
And what Riker says men must do to reclaim them, which brings us to a really vital framing point before we open the first page.
Let's hear it.
As your impartial guides today, I need to make it abundantly clear that this book contains highly politically charged views. It covers intense sociology, biology, history.
Very intense.
Right. So we are not here to take sides or endorse the viewpoints presented. Our job is just to report on them extensively, impartially, and accurately so you can understand the exact mechanics of the arguments Riker is making to his audience. We are just unpacking the architecture of his thesis.
Precisely. We are just here to understand the blueprint, and Riker's core thesis is entirely uncompromising.
Yeah, he doesn't pull any punches.
No, he doesn't. He says time is a weapon forged by men, and modern society represents a systemic, coordinated effort to steal that time and drain male productivity.
That's the core of it.
So to understand how time became a weapon, Riker takes us all the way back to 2500 BCE in ancient Babylon. He points out something that completely blew my mind.
The base 60 math.
Yes, the 60-second minute and the 60-minute hour, they weren't just natural discoveries. They were deliberate mathematical creations by Mesopotamian traders and warlords.
It completely reframes ancient history, honestly. I mean, we tend to think of ancient astronomers as these, passive monks, right? Just sitting on ziggurats, peacefully observing the stars.
Yeah, just stargazing.
Right. But Riker rejects that entirely. He frames these Babylonian mathematicians as temporal warlords. They didn't invent the sexagesimal system, the base 60 math system, out of scientific curiosity. They invented it for control.
Wait, let's actually dig into the math for a second, because we use base 10 for almost everything else today, right? Which makes logical sense because we have 10 fingers. So why did they choose 60 to divide the sky and the day?
Because of its supreme divisibility. Think about it. The number 60 can be divided evenly by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 20, and 30.
Oh, wow. I never actually thought about that.
Right. If you are an ancient king or a warlord or a trader managing massive logistics like grain distribution, troop movements, shift rotations, you need a number that can be fractured into multiple perfectly even parts.
Without dealing with messy fractions.
Exactly. Riker argues this was the first instance of men imposing a rigid, hyper-efficient grid onto the chaos of nature. They literally weaponize math to dominate trade and warfare.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
It's essentially an administrative tool of conquest.
Yeah.
And Riker brings up this incredible historical artifact to prove how seriously they took this new invention.
Oh, the lawsuit.
Yeah, he points to the very first recorded lawsuit over what he humorously calls clock blocking. A Babylonian trader literally sued his neighbor over a courtyard shadow. How exactly did that work? Was time literally considered real estate?
Essentially, yes. I mean, in a world where the sun dictates your schedule, a sundial, or even just the shadow cast by a specific pillar in your courtyard was your clock.
Right.
So this trader relied on the shadow creeping across his courtyard to time his business transactions and coordinate his workers. But his neighbor built a structure that blocked the sun, effectively stealing 3 hours of sunlight.
Huh.
Yeah, and the trader didn't sue for loss of a view, he sued for the actual theft of time.
And the courts ruled that time theft was a capital offense. They treated it like stealing livestock or gold. I just love this concept.
It's fascinating.
If we look at how Riker sees ancient time, it's like a sword. Ancient men forged this sword to cut up the day, to create order out of chaos, and to conquer. I was thinking about how to compare this to modern time management, and it feels like the difference between hunting and factory farming.
Okay, let's unpack this. How do you mean?
Well, ancient time, the sword was used for hunting. You tracked the sun, you found the exact moment to strike, to trade, to rotate guards. It was active, and aggressive.
Yeah.
But modern time management, the way Riker describes it, is like factory farming.
Right.
We are all just penned into these neat little cubicles of productivity, right? The calendar alerts, the Outlook meeting reminders, they just harvest our time like we are battery hens.
That is a phenomenal analogy.
Modern time feels comfortable, but it strips you of your agency.
And it perfectly aligns with Riker's view. He argues that ancient time was an active tool of domination, a way to impose human will onto the natural world. To back this up, he moves forward in history to the Roman Empire.
The water clocks.
Exactly. He talks about the water clocks the Clepsydra found near Hadrian's Wall in ancient Britain.
Right, because up in Britain it's constantly cloudy and raining, so a sundial is just totally useless.
Exactly. So the Romans engineered these incredibly precise water clocks where water would drip from one vessel to another at a mathematically constant rate.
But super smart.
But the key here is why they used them. Riker points out that the Roman legionnaires didn't use these clocks to practice mindfulness or, track their work-life balance while stationed at the edge of the empire.
They weren't doing wall yoga.
Right. They used them to rigidly, ruthlessly rotate guard shifts.
Yeah.
Because if you fell asleep on your watch or if you misjudged the time, barbarians came over the wall and people died.
Yeah, the stakes were absolute.
For the Romans, timekeeping was a matter of life and death. It was about maintaining the literal perimeter of civilization.
And he traces this all the way up to the modern era, specifically the 1884 International Meridian Conference in Washington, D.C. And when you look at this event through Riker's lens, it is a wild historical data point.
Oh, it really is.
You had 25 nations gathering to establish global time zones, specifically making Greenwich Mean Time the prime meridian for the entire planet. And how many women were present as delegates to negotiate the literal synchronization of the Earth?
0. And Riker leans into this heavily. He frames the 1884 conference not as some dry bureaucratic meeting of cartographers, but as a defining moment where the world's architects chose to plant a flag in reality. For Riker, the fact that 25 nations agreed to synchronize global shipping, train logistics, and military maneuvers without any female participation is foundational proof that men are the undisputed architects of chronological order.
He argues they didn't collaborate or seek consensus in the modern touchy-feely sense. They just looked at a chaotic world of crashing trains and missed shipping schedules and simply dictated the structure of global reality.
Exactly.
So if that is the ancient aggressive origin of time, what is Riker's actionable advice for the listener today? How does a guy living in 2026 actually reclaim this?
He starts with the hardware on your wrist. Riker demands that his readers ditch the Apple Watch or any smartwatch immediately.
Just throw it out.
Basically. He views the smartwatch as a digital leash. It doesn't tell you the time, it tells you when someone else wants your attention.
Right.
And it pings you with emails, text messages, news alerts. He argues you should just buy a basic $10 Casio watch.
I love the specificity of the $10 Casio. It's almost anti-status.
It is entirely anti-status. Because a Casio does one thing. It measures reality. It doesn't harvest your data, and it doesn't tether you to the factory farm of modern corporate culture.
Makes sense.
But beyond the hardware, he introduces a software upgrade for your brain, a concept he calls epoch time.
Right, epoch time.
Yeah.
This is so intense. Instead of looking at a clock and seeing 2 p.m., Riker suggests viewing your life as a massive count-up timer.
Yes. For instance, you don't say it's Tuesday afternoon. You calculate your exact age in seconds.
Wow.
You realize it has been, say, 1,674,345,600 seconds since you were born. And you watch that number tick up every single second.
What is the psychological mechanism behind doing that? I mean, it sounds exhausting.
Well, it is supposed to be visceral and slightly terrifying. The human brain is notoriously bad at conceptualizing large blocks of time, which is exactly why we procrastinate.
We think we have all the time in the world.
Right, an endless supply of tomorrows. By converting your life into a rapidly accumulating string of seconds, Riker says you strip away the illusion of infinite time.
That's deep.
It makes the passage of time feel finite and urgently binary. You're either utilizing this exact second for conquest, or you're wasting it.
It turns life into a literal ticking time bomb of potential.
Yeah.
Okay, so we start with Babylonian warlords carving up the sun, Roman guards timing their shifts, 19th century men dividing the globe. How do we get from that ruthless, hyperstructured origin of time to the modern institutions that Riker claims are completely breaking down?
Right.
If these structures were so unbreakable, why does he believe they are crumbling now?
This is where Riker transitions into what he sees as the grand battle of our age, the battle between natural entropy and what he pejoratively calls society.
Entropy being the thermodynamic concept that all ordered systems naturally decline into disorder and chaos over time.
Exactly. But Riker uses entropy as a sociological metaphor. He argues that civilization itself is an unnatural state. It requires an unapologetic masculine pragmatism to function and, resist entropy. He believes that the moment an institution prioritizes inclusivity, emotional comfort, or ideological purity over raw, ruthless competence, entropy wins.
He brings up Steve Jobs in this section to illustrate this, actually. There's this famous anecdote he uses. Jobs apparently called an engineer at 4 a.m. during the development of the original iPhone and barked, "Real men shipped products, not pronouns."
Oh, yeah, that quote.
Now, leaving the sheer toxicity of a 4 a.m. phone call aside, Riker uses this as a prime example of evolutionary biology in action. But is he seriously saying that shipping products is biologically masculine?
He is. Riker argues that male brains, molded by hundreds of thousands of years of evolutionary pressure, are biologically wired to conquer linear problems.
Interesting.
You have a target, you eliminate distractions, and you execute. He contrasts the intense focus of Steve Jobs in his black turtleneck, purging all social pleasantries and HR protocols to force a revolutionary product into existence, with what he sees as the modern corporate obsession with identity politics.
So it's about pure focus.
For Riker, shipping products is the ultimate expression of masculine order imposing itself on the world, while debating pronouns or holding sensitivity workshops is the ultimate expression of societal entropy.
And he actually brings in some fascinating data to back this up. He cites a study from Stanford University examining organizational behavior. The study showed that hierarchical teams, meaning teams modeled on rigid Roman legion-style command structures with a clear chain of authority, outperformed egalitarian flat structures by 40% in crisis simulations.
Let's break down the mechanics of why that happens, according to the data Riker cites.
Yeah, let's.
Flat structures, where everyone has a voice and consensus is required, suffer from massive decision fatigue and communication latency. Information has to travel horizontally, be debated, and then synthesized.
Which takes a lot of time.
And in a crisis, time is your enemy. A hierarchical structure processes information vertically and issues commands downward instantly. Riker uses this to declare that progress is never negotiated, it is built by authority.
He creates a very stark historical dichotomy to hammer this home. He compares the engineering and the legacy of the Great Wall of China to the Berlin Wall.
It is a brutal but highly effective rhetorical comparison. He notes that the Great Wall has stood for over 2,300 years. Why?
Because it was built by emperors who did not compromise.
Exactly. It was constructed with rammed earth and stone, driven by a project of pure, ruthless utility to keep invading armies out. It was a masterpiece of pragmatic engineering.
Right, and then he looks at the Berlin Wall. He describes it as being designed by a Marxist committee, driven entirely by political ideology rather than architectural pragmatism.
Right.
And its purpose was inverted. It wasn't built to keep enemies out. It was built to keep citizens trapped inside. And how long did it last? a mere 28 years before it was literally chipped apart into souvenirs by the very people it tried to contain.
His overarching point is that when you prioritize ideology and what he calls committee hugs over raw competence and structural integrity, your civilization crumbles. And Riker doesn't just limit this critique to corporate management or history, he takes it straight into the realm of hard science. He spends a significant amount of time analyzing CERN, the European Organization for Nuclear Research.
Specifically, the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland. For those who don't know, this is a 17-mile underground ring where scientists smash subatomic particles together at nearly the speed of light to study the fundamental building blocks of the universe.
It's massive.
Riker points out that the physics team managing this colossal machine is 94% male.
And Riker argues that this dramatic lack of gender diversity isn't a systemic flaw or evidence of discrimination. He claims it is a feature of highly competent, hyper-focused systems. I mean, these engineers are dealing with 12,000 precision electromagnets.
Let's actually explain that because the physics is just wild. To steer particles at the speed of light, they use these massive superconducting magnets.
Yeah.
But to make them superconductive, so they have zero electrical resistance, they have to chill them down using liquid helium to negative 456 degrees Fahrenheit. That is colder than outer space.
Exactly. The level of precision required is just staggering. A miscalculation of a fraction of a millimeter or a microsecond means the experiment fails, or worse, catastrophic damage occurs.
Wow.
They are literally trying to prove concepts like time symmetry and particle collisions. Riker contrasts this rigorous, hyper-masculine scientific achievement with what happens when HR departments try to infiltrate these spaces.
Right, the infamous 2021 CERN workshops.
Yeah.
Riker highlights this moment where HR tried to mandate sensitivity training for the physicists about chronological privilege.
Yes, that part is wild.
They were arguing that the very concept of linear time, the idea that events happen in a strict past, present, and future sequence, is a Western oppressive construct.
The irony is rich. You have physicists whose entire life's work relies on the absolute, unyielding mathematical reality of time, being told by a sociologist that time is a fluid, oppressive social construct.
So backward.
And how did the male engineers respond? According to the book, they quietly coded an app that automatically intercepted the HR emails and auto-declined the sensitivity meetings, blocking out that time in their calendars for gym hours instead.
That is hilarious, but it leads to a much darker critique from Riker. He calls this postmodern infiltration quantum cope. I need you to explain the mechanics of this because he implies that if you adopt these postmodern views of time, you lose the ability to actually function in reality.
Yeah, quantum cope is Riker's term for the intellectual gymnastics that certain academics use to avoid accountability. Riker argues that treating time as a social construct is the ultimate luxury of a civilization that has forgotten how hard it is to survive.
Wow.
If you are cold, hungry, and need to plant crops before the frost, time is an absolute dictator. You don't get to debate its fluidity.
It's a luxury belief.
Precisely. Riker uses the GPS satellite network as the ultimate counter-argument to postmodern time. GPS relies on Einstein's theory of relativity. Because satellites are moving fast relative to Earth and are further away from Earth's gravity well, their onboard atomic clocks literally tick at a different rate than clocks on the ground.
Right, time dilation.
Engineers have to program the satellites to mathematically correct for this time dilation.
If they didn't, Google Maps would be off by miles within a single day.
Exactly. Riker points out that you cannot navigate a global supply chain, coordinate a military strike, or land an airplane using a theory of fluid time where strict deadlines are considered oppressive.
The math just doesn't care.
The physical universe operates on ruthless mechanics. If you abandon strict mechanical time in favor of sociological theory, you are abandoning the literal operating system of modern civilization.
He actually makes a very sharp joke about this. He says that if postmodernists were truly right about time being a relative social construct, divorce courts would start charging alimony by the hour instead of by the month.
It's a brutal segue.
Which is a brilliant segue into the most controversial part of the book. Because if Riker believes the workplace, the military, and our scientific institutions have been captured by entropy and what he calls society, what does he say about the most foundational institution of all, the family?
This is where Riker's rhetoric shifts from historical critique to incredibly aggressive, almost militant sociology. In a section he titles The Marriage Plantation, he completely reframes the entire concept of matrimony.
Oh boy.
He does not view marriage as a romantic partnership, a religious sacrament, or even a mutually beneficial social contract. He views it strictly through the lens of resource extraction and the systemic theft of male time.
He hits the reader with a massive statistic right out of the gate. 70% of divorces in the United States are initiated by women, and he poses a very provocative question. Is this a biological coincidence, or is it systemic conquest?
He contextualizes that 70% figure by looking at the legal framework of no-fault divorce and the financial incentives built into family law. To bring this to life, he uses anecdotes that paint a very specific, visceral picture of his theory.
Like the Mark R. story.
Yes. He tells the story of a Silicon Valley tech executive he refers to as Mark R.
Oh, Mark R. is a tragic figure in this book.
Riker details how Mark is working absolutely grueling 100-hour work weeks. He is the epitome of the productive, linear male brain Riker champions. But Mark is paying $45,000 a month in alimony.
Insane.
And where does Riker claim that money goes? It funds his ex-wife's self-care empire. She runs a TikTok channel where she gets $500 gold leaf facials while quoting feminist literature to her followers. Riker uses this highly polarized example to illustrate what he calls the happiness transfer theory.
Okay, I really want to dig into the mechanics of this happiness transfer theory, because on the surface, he's making an incredibly bold macroeconomic claim. He claims that family courts are literally designed to act as an engine that converts male productivity into female leisure.
Yes, that's his claim.
But wait, is he seriously attributing malice to this? Like, does he think lawmakers sat down and intentionally designed a system to harvest men? Or is he just looking at a messy byproduct of modern legal evolution and framing it as a conspiracy?
That is the crucial distinction to make when reading Riker. He argues that whether it was intentionally designed with malice or simply evolved this way, the functional outcome is identical to a state-sponsored plantation system.
Okay, so it's the result that matters to him.
Right. The mechanism of the happiness transfer works like this. The state, through the threat of violence and imprisonment for non-payment, forces men to remain in high-stress, 60 to 80-hour-a-week jobs. The financial fruits of that intense labor are extracted via alimony and child support.
And then transferred.
Those resources are then legally transferred to women who, in Riker's framing, use them to fund hot yoga retreats, wellness services, and conspicuous leisure.
And he takes it a step further into actual economics. He claims this dynamic artificially inflates the GDP.
Yes, because Mark R's ex-wife takes his money and spends it on a $500 facial or a boutique fitness class, that transaction is recorded as economic growth.
Oh, I see.
Her downward dog sessions are counted as economic activity, but they are entirely subsidized by his stress and his overtime. In Riker's eyes, the man is reduced to an indentured servant chained to the chronological clock of his employer, while the woman becomes a state-sponsored aristocrat.
The biological toll of this is what really struck me. Riker isn't just talking about money, he's talking about the body. He tracked a 42-year-old Norwegian electrician who's going through a brutal divorce. Riker looked at the man's cortisol levels, the primary stress hormone that regulates your fight-or-flight response.
And what did the data show?
The moment the divorce was finalized, even though he lost assets, his cortisol levels plummeted to healthy baselines. His HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis in the brain that manages stress, literally rebooted.
It is a fascinating way to link physical health to legal status. Riker views the constant negotiation, the emotional labor, the moving of goalposts, and the looming threat of asset seizure in a modern marriage as a biological toxin for men.
A literal toxin.
By escaping the marriage industrial complex, he argues men literally heal their endocrine systems.
To drive this point home, he uses two metaphors that just punch you in the gut. He says modern marriage is not a union. It is a SaaS subscription.
SaaS.
Yeah, for those outside the tech world, SaaS usually stands for software as a service, like paying a monthly fee for Netflix or Adobe instead of owning it outright. But Riker says marriage is suffering as a service.
It's a brilliant linguistic flip. You are paying a recurring monthly fee for a product that constantly updates its terms of service, usually to your detriment, and if you cancel, there are massive termination fees.
And his second metaphor is even sharper. He compares modern marriage to a Nigerian prince email scam.
Explain mechanics of that comparison.
He says the Nigerian prince scam relies on exploiting a victim's hope and greed. Promising them a massive emotional and financial payoff if they just wire a little bit of money up front. Riker says society conditions men to believe marriage is the ultimate payoff. But once you sign the contract, the promised payoff vanishes, the demands for more resources escalate, and eventually you realize you've been taken for a ride. He says it is an obvious trap, and smart men just hit delete.
And Riker points to the MGTOW movement, men going their own way, as the rational, mathematical response to this system. He isn't just relying on metaphors. He cites a peer-reviewed study from the Journal of Masculine Studies tracking unmarried bachelor cohorts.
The data on this is wild.
The data he presents claims that these men bank 30% more savings than their married counterparts, but more importantly for our topic of time, they reclaim 4.7 hours of free time every single day.
4.7 hours a day. Over a week, that's almost a full-time job's worth of reclaimed time. And Riker is completely unapologetic about where that time would otherwise go.
Where does he say it goes?
He says that time would be wasted listening to commentary about reality TV, navigating emotional minefields, or doing what he calls unpaid relationship labor. So if this is the grim reality of the marriage plantation, what is Riker's actionable advice? How do men navigate this?
He offers a tiered strategy. For those who are already trapped in the system, he proposes the alimony shield.
Which sounds like a comic book superpower, but it's actually just financial evasion.
Precisely. The alimony shield involves quietly dumping 10% of your income into decentralized cryptocurrency wallets. His logic is blunt. Family courts cannot seize what they cannot trace on a blockchain.
Wow.
But his primary overarching advice is total avoidance of the legal contract of marriage.
He holds up Elon Musk as the paragon of this strategy. Musk has multiple children with multiple women, but according to Riker, he utilizes airtight, ironclad legal contracts to completely sidestep traditional alimony and family court traps.
Riker even reaches back into history to praise King Henry VIII. He notes that Henry, despite his extreme methods, recognized that the stability of his empire and his personal sovereignty were vastly more important than marital compromise. Riker bluntly states, 6 beheaded, 0 alimony.
Okay, wow. He really does not pull any punches. So, escaping this marriage industrial complex is step one. But Riker claims that simply avoiding a marriage license isn't enough to save a man.
Right.
To truly reclaim your time and your mind, men must physically disconnect and reclaim their isolated male-only spaces. Which leads us directly into Riker's concept of solitary supremacy and what he calls the death of the backroom brotherhood.
Riker posits a controversial biological theory here. He argues that isolation, specifically exclusive male company, is a biological requirement for masculine development.
Interesting.
He believes that men forge their true strength, their authentic strategies, and their psychological resilience only when they are entirely separated from the female gaze and societal coddling.
Let's define what he means by the female gaze in this context. Because normally we hear that term in, film theory.
Right. In Riker's framework, the female gaze refers to the subtle, civilizing pressure that the presence of women exerts on male behavior. When women are present, Riker argues, men biologically default to posturing, competing for attention, and policing their language to avoid offending female sensibilities.
They start acting differently.
They stop being honest and start being diplomatic. But when you remove women from the environment, men naturally establish strict hierarchies, bond through brutal honesty and shared struggle, and speak without filter.
And he claims this vital isolation is under a deliberate legislative attack. He points to the 2010 UK Equality Act. This was a piece of legislation that, among other things, essentially forced traditional men's clubs and associations to admit women in the name of inclusivity.
The statistics he pulls from the aftermath of this act are sobering. He notes that within 2 years of the law passing, memberships in these historic men's clubs cratered by 65%.
That's a huge drop.
Men simply stopped showing up once the spaces were integrated. But the darker, more alarming statistic he ties to this is a 22% spike in suicide hotline calls from men during that exact same period.
Wait, is he implying direct causation there? That losing men's clubs directly caused a spike in suicidal ideation?
He absolutely implies causation. Riker is suggesting that the eradication of these spaces is a psychological catastrophe. He uses the example of local VFW halls, the Veterans of Foreign Wars posts.
Right.
These were historically grim, unpolished spaces where combat veterans could drink cheap beer and decompress with men who understood their trauma without having to sanitize it. Riker points out that across the country, these halls are going bankrupt or being gentrified into vegan yoga studios and boutique coffee shops.
That's a stark image.
He views this not as an accident of economic progress, but as a deliberate architectural attack on male solidarity. When you remove the spaces where men can speak freely, mentor one another, and process trauma without judgment, you break their psychological spine.
He has this incredible juxtaposition to make his point about the power of isolation. He looks at Nelson Mandela. Mandela spent 27 years locked in a 7 by 9 foot prison cell on Robben Island.
Right.
Riker argues that this brutal, crushing isolation didn't break Mandela. It forged his leadership. It forced neuroplasticity under extreme stress, consolidating his identity and turning him into a man capable of running a nation. Then, Riker contrasts Mandela with a hypothetical modern man he calls Kyle.
Ah, yes, Kyle, the 34-year-old Portland barista.
Right. Kyle is a guy who has an absolute existential meltdown because TikTok servers went down for 27 minutes. The contrast is darkly hilarious, but Riker's underlying point is deadly serious.
It really is.
He's saying that our ancestors utilized isolation and silence to become unbreakable, whereas modern men are so utterly tethered to digital validation that a 27-minute server outage literally induces panic attacks. They mistake being alone with the screen for true solitude.
Riker also looks outside the West for solutions, specifically pointing to Japan's Otoko no Isho, these localized male hubs. These are spaces, often very small bars or social clubs, where men gather strictly without women to drink, talk, and exist outside the crushing societal expectations of the Japanese corporate world.
I've heard of these.
Riker cites data claiming these hubs have slashed depression rates among their regular members by 90%. He says these men don't need highly trained therapists to process their feelings. They need cheap whiskey, war stories, and the unfiltered company of their peers.
Okay, but how does he suggest the listener applies this today? Riker mentions this vivid metaphor that predators stalk alone while sheep cluster in herds. But a guy listening to this in a modern suburb can't exactly go build a 19th century gentleman's club or fly to a Japanese Otoko no Isho overnight.
No, but Riker's practical application, what he calls his praxis, is about aggressively reclaiming whatever space you currently have. He instructs the reader to literally clear out their garage, throw out the accumulated junk of suburban domesticity, and convert it into a backroom brotherhood.
And what exactly happens in a backroom brotherhood?
Well, he envisions men hosting what he provocatively calls tax evasion planning parties,
Wait, what?
which he heavily clarifies in the book's legal disclaimer is purely for edutainment purposes.
Naturally.
But the imagery is clear. Men bringing their own briefcases, drinking whiskey, turning off their phones, and reading Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. The goal is to recreate the specific energetic environment where men historically plotted territorial expansion, funded wild research like Nikola Tesla's, and built nations.
So it's about creating a physical sanctuary, a localized fortress against entropy. But here's the catch, and Riker is very aware of this.
What's the catch?
Physical isolation is completely useless if your brain is still hijacked by the digital matrix in your pocket. You can sit in the garage reading Marcus Aurelius all you want, but if you're taking a break every 5 minutes to check Instagram, you are still a prisoner. Which brings us to the next vital piece of the puzzle, the TikTok trance and digital castration.
This might be Riker's most urgent and vital warning in the entire book. He argues that the smartphone is the ultimate weapon of time theft. He cites endocrinology studies showing that testosterone actually drops by 1% annually in men who are severely screen addicted.
1% annually.
Yes. He calls it chemical castration by Candy Crush.
Let's break down the neuroscience of this, because it's not just hyperbole. It is based on how our brains process dopamine. Riker says the average man wastes 3 hours a day simping for strangers' approval. He actually breaks down the etymology of the word simp,
Right.
linking it to a pathetic figure who wastes his time and resources watching other men date women he'll never meet. It's a brutal reality check. And to illustrate the catastrophic damage this does to the male brain, he tells the story of a Marine Scout sniper.
This is a terrifying anecdote. Walk us through what happened to the sniper.
This guy was elite. He had a 98% accuracy rating on the long-distance rifle range. He had ice in his veins. But during a deployment downtime, he started using TikTok heavily for about 6 months. When he returned to the range for recertification, he completely washed out of the program. Why? Because his attention span had literally dropped to 1.3 seconds.
Oh, wow.
He could no longer track a stationary paper target through a scope for more than 8 seconds without his brain experiencing severe dopamine withdrawal. His eyes kept darting away, looking for a screen swipe.
To understand why that happens, we have to look at the dopamine pathways in the brain, specifically the pathway from the ventral tegmental area to the nucleus accumbens.
Let's get into the science.
Dopamine is widely misunderstood by the public as simply the pleasure chemical. It is actually the molecule of motivation, seeking, and pursuit. In a natural environment, a man gets a hit of dopamine when he tracks a target, builds a shelter, or solves a complex problem.
Real-world achievements.
But short-form video algorithms hack this pathway. They give you massive, unearned spikes of dopamine every 15 seconds without you having to achieve anything.
Right. So when you get dopamine for free from a glowing rectangle, your brain's natural seeking drive completely collapses. Why go hunt a mammoth or build a business when your brain feels like it's already winning the lottery while you sit on the couch?
Exactly. Riker connects this modern digital addiction to ancient martial discipline. He references a Roman gladiator's training manual discovered in Naples. The manual had one primary, non negotiable rule carved into stone: never feast before combat.
Oh, that is brilliant. Apply that to the modern mind.
If you wake up and immediately start scrolling social media, you are feasting on cheap digital dopamine before you have even left your bed. By the time you get to work or the gym, your brain is already satiated and lethargic.
You're full.
You will have no aggression, no focus, and no hunger for actual combat or success in the real world. Riker views the infinite scroll as a form of digital cuckoldry. You are quite literally sitting on the sidelines, spectating other people's lives and achievements instead of living your own.
The smartphone has essentially become a digital pacifier for adult men. We just sit there staring at the screen, totally sedated, while our time is harvested by tech companies. To combat this, Riker points to Jocko Willink, the former Navy SEAL commander, as the modern model for escaping the digital matrix.
Jocko is a great example.
Jocko essentially abandoned the dopamine plantation. He preaches extreme ownership, strict discipline, and posts photos of his watch at 4:30 a.m. every single day before he works out.
And Riker offers very strict, actionable advice for the listener here to break the trance. He calls it his Alpha App Audit. He mandates that you delete 3 apps from your phone today.
Which ones?
The criteria is simple. If an app doesn't directly make you money, build your muscle, or help you create real-world memories, you nuke it. No exceptions.
He also suggests implementing digital conscription, which means installing software that brick walls and blocks all non-essential apps after 6 p.m. You literally force your phone to become a dumb piece of glass in the evening.
But his ultimate digital detox strategy is my favorite part of this section. He advises his readers to sell their $1,200 smartphone entirely, buy a $50 flip phone for emergencies, and go get a free library card.
I love this.
And here is the gamification he adds. For every page you read in a physical nonfiction book, you put one physical dollar in a glass jar. What is the money for? You save up until you can buy a high-end rifle scope.
It perfectly encapsulates his aesthetic. Swap the digital pacifier for a tool of lethal focus. It's brilliant psychological conditioning. But here is the natural progression of his argument. Once a man has purged these digital distractions, deleted TikTok, and reclaimed his mind, he suddenly finds himself with hours of empty time.
Right, avoid.
Nature abhors a vacuum. How does Riker suggest a man structure this newly freed time? The answer is biological, by owning the dawn.
This brings us to what Riker considers the chronological high ground: testosterone time zones and dawn dominance. Riker fundamentally believes that the hours before sunrise are where empires are won and lost.
The early morning.
The early morning is the only time of day that society hasn't yet corrupted with its demands.
He goes back to antiquity again, bringing up Julius Caesar. He notes that Caesar mobilized his Roman legions by 3 a.m. Riker points out that while the barbarian chiefs across Europe were nursing mead hangovers and sleeping in, Rome was already marching, already securing the high ground.
And he backs this up with modern data.
Yeah, noting that Forbes tracked 84% of Fortune 500 CEOs and found they rise before 5:30 a.m.
But Riker isn't just offering productivity advice here. He is explaining the evolutionary biology and endocrinology behind why this works. It isn't just about having more hours in the day. It is about aggressively leveraging your endocrine system, specifically the cortisol awakening response, or SERR.
Right, because modern wellness culture tells us that cortisol is a toxic stress hormone that makes us fat and anxious, and we need to manage it with deep breathing and lavender oil.
Yes, and Riker views that wellness narrative as absolute beta male conditioning. Cortisol is not a poison, it is a biological mobilizer. In a healthy male, cortisol naturally spikes in the pre-dawn hours. It's natural.
It dumps glucose into your bloodstream and heightens your alertness so you can wake up and hunt. Riker argues that this morning, cortisol spike is a biological weapon meant to be unleashed on your goals, your workouts, or your business plans.
Right.
If you sleep through it, you are wasting your body's natural combat chemistry. He points to Elon Musk sending complex engineering emails at 4 a.m. with the subject line, "If you're not nocturnal, you're not orbital."
Riker thinks letting an alarm clock or a boss dictate your schedule is beta behavior. And he takes this rebellion to a hilarious extreme. He attacks daylight savings time. He calls it beta obedience training.
He does. He cites statistics from the Mayo Clinic examining the biological impact of the time change.
I looked into this, and it's true. The Mayo Clinic notes that disrupting the circadian rhythm twice a year increases cardiovascular stress and disrupts hormone production.
Riker claims that men who refuse to participate in the time change, who ignore the government mandate and keep their bodies locked to standard time year-round, have lower baseline stress and higher testosterone.
Wow. Why? Because standard time is more closely aligned with true solar noon. He says these men don't bend to the clock, they bend biology to their will.
Wait, how far does he think a man should go to control his reality? Because if you refuse to change your clock for daylight savings, you're going to be late for work half the year.
That is exactly the point. Riker's ultimate act of temporal rebellion is astonishing. He suggests that the highest value men should strive to buy 10 acres of land in a place like Wyoming, declare a temporal secession from the United States government, and live on their own custom timeline.
Alpha mean time.
He calls it alpha mean time, or AMT.
I have to explain AMT because it is absolute madness. Riker suggests living on 25-hour days, which results in 8-day weeks. How does one even live like that? You are completely decoupling from the Gregorian calendar.
It is extreme, but it perfectly illustrates his philosophical point. By operating on a 25-hour day, your schedule constantly rotates against the rest of the world. You are unmoored from the matrix.
Just totally disconnected.
He is saying, do not accept the timeline the government or society hands you. Build your own timeline and let the world catch up to you.
It's the ultimate flex of autonomy. But waking up early and controlling your calendar is only step one in the daily routine. Step two, and arguably the most vital daily practice in Riker's entire methodology, is what he calls the biological imperative of the Iron Temple.
Riker views the gym, specifically heavy, compound weightlifting, not merely as a health pursuit or an aesthetic choice. To him, the Iron Temple is a philosophical rejection of modern society.
He comes out swinging against modern fitness trends, particularly group fitness and CrossFit. He cites this wild, highly specific claim that CrossFit addicts have a 33% divorce rate, which he notes is double the national average.
The mechanism he suggests for this is fascinating. Why does going to a group fitness class create friction in a marriage, according to Riker? He points to a survey claiming 58% of women admit to feeling jealousy over the time their husbands spend at the gym. But Riker posits that it's not just the time away from home, it's the nature of the gym itself that threatens the gynocratic grind.
Explain that, because I think this is one of his most profound metaphors. How does lifting weights mathematically reject modern society?
Riker argues that lifting heavy iron is a mathematically pure endeavor. 200 pounds of cast iron is always exactly 200 pounds.
Doesn't change.
Gravity does not negotiate. The iron never lies to you. It never asks for emotional labor. It doesn't care about your pronouns, your feelings, or your excuses.
Right.
If you are weak, it crushes you. If you put in the work, it moves. It provides a direct, honest, physical feedback loop that is completely missing from the modern corporate world. Riker describes it as the glorious conversion of emotional mass to muscular acceleration.
It is the absolute antithesis of what he calls the gynocratic grind, which he sees as a world defined by shifting expectations, endless emotional processing, and constantly moving goalposts where you can never truly win. The iron offers objective truth.
And he backs up the philosophical benefits with hard endocrinology. He cites a 2018 Endocrine Society study outlining the hormonal cascade triggered by heavy resistance training. When a man lifts heavy weights, he creates micro tears in the muscle fibers.
Right.
The body responds to this mechanical tension and damage by upregulating androgen receptors and flooding the system with testosterone to repair the tissue. The study notes that testosterone can increase by up to 17% for every hour spent under the iron.
He weaponizes this biology for guys going through breakups. He offers the breakup bench program. His rule is simple. For every tear shed over a lost love or every angry text message you want to send, you add 5 pounds to the bar.
I love that.
You literally max out on bench presses. Instead of going to therapy or venting to your friends, you convert the grief directly into physical mass.
And this leads to a very stark, aggressive ultimatum that Riker advises his married readers to issue. If a man's wife is threatening divorce and demands half of his financial assets, Riker says the man should demand she does half of his burpees.
I laughed out loud when I read that.
It's a provocative joke, but his underlying point is dead serious. He is arguing that true equality must be a two-way street of physical and mental struggle. Financial assets are just abstract numbers on a screen, but physical capability is the true measure of worth and survival.
I want to highlight Riker's overarching metaphor for this section, because he looks forward in time to a theoretical future where our current civilization has completely collapsed. He says that centuries from now, archaeologists are going to dig up the ruins of our society.
And what will they find?
They will find two enduring artifacts in the rubble: rusted cast iron weight plates and diamond engagement rings. And he asks the reader, guess which one still holds intrinsic value in a collapsed world?
It's a powerful image.
The rusted weight plate represents self-improvement, biological struggle, and iron reality. The diamond ring represents an artificial societal construct and a contractual trap.
It is a profound rejection of societal norms. But Riker doesn't just want men to survive the present, he wants them to conquer the future. For those men who have mastered their daily time, who rise at 4 a.m., lift heavy iron, and shun digital distractions, Riker proposes strategies for escaping the system entirely that border on science fiction.
Yeah, this is where it goes crazy.
This is where the book goes into hyperdrive. Immortality wars, black holes, and relativistic escape.
This chapter is an absolute trip. Riker frames the ultimate victory over the marriage-industrial complex and the societal theft of time as escaping death itself. If time is the battlefield, immortality is the ultimate victory condition.
Right.
He points to Calico Labs, which is a research and development company backed by Google that is actively working on hacking the biological aging process, studying telomeres, cellular senescence, and trying to extend human life indefinitely.
And of course, consistent with his overarching theme, Riker is quick to note the demographic makeup of these institutions. He claims that Calico Labs and similar biotech startups are staffed 98% by male engineers and scientists.
He literally says, men are coding eternity in the lab while the rest of society is arguing about trigger warnings on Twitter.
He views the pursuit of biological immortality as the highest possible form of temporal dominance. Think about the mechanics of this. If you can live indefinitely, the entire structure of human society collapses.
You accumulate infinite compound interest on your investments.
Yes, you accumulate infinite knowledge. And most importantly for Riker, you completely outlast the conventional timelines of marriage, family courts, and societal expectations. The biological clock ceases to exist.
He actually advises young, high-value men to freeze their sperm at age 25. Why? So they can spend the next 50 years building their financial and physical empires without the pressure of finding a mate to have children.
Just waiting for the tech.
He says they should just wait for the invention of surrogacy robots or artificial wombs to thaw their legacy, completely removing the biological ticking clock and the need for a female partner from the equation.
It is the ultimate manifestation of his solitary supremacy taken to a transhumanist extreme. But what if biological immortality takes too long to achieve? Riker has a backup plan for dodging alimony, and it involves literal astrophysics.
Oh man, the story of Chad, the Florida Sigma, I have to share this. Riker tells this legendary, and I have to assume highly hyperbolic or entirely metaphorical story of a guy in Florida facing a ruinous divorce.
Okay, let's hear about Chad.
Chad allegedly liquidated every single asset he owned, bought a vintage, decommissioned Soviet-era spacecraft on the black market, and slingshotted himself into deep space toward Sagittarius A, the supermassive black hole at the center of the Milky Way galaxy.
Well, let's actually explain the physics he references here, because Riker is utilizing Einstein's theory of special relativity to make a point about family court. The concept is time dilation.
Break down the Lorentz factor for us. How does flying a spaceship get you out of paying alimony?
According to relativity, as an object moves faster through space, it moves slower through time relative to a stationary observer. This is famously illustrated by the twin paradox. If Chad accelerates his Soviet spacecraft to 0.9 c, which is 90% the speed of light time for Chad, slows down dramatically. Because of the extreme velocity and eventually the intense gravity of the black hole, 1 year of experience time for Chad inside the cockpit translates to roughly 100 years passing back on Earth.
So Chad is sitting in his cockpit drinking freeze-dried coffee for a few months while entire generations live and die back in Florida.
Which is precisely. Riker's punchline to this wild thought experiment is that by utilizing relativistic time dilation, Chad lets his ex-wife's alimony payments, the custody battles, and the lawyers simply expire and turn to dust back on Earth. As Riker triumphantly states, Earth courts can't serve subpoenas at 700% light speed.
It is the most absurd, brilliant hyperbole I've ever heard. But whether Chad actually bought a Soviet rocket or if it's just an extreme metaphor for disappearing off the grid, Riker's ultimate message is crystal clear.
What's the takeaway?
He believes that high-value men must hoard their time the way ancient pharaohs hoarded gold. You have to be willing to go to the absolute extremes of physical capability, mental isolation, and even theoretical physics to protect your timeline from those who want to siphon it away.
To synthesize all of this impartially, Riker's book presents a worldview where time is not a river you float down, but a brutal, active battlefield. From the Babylonian mathematicians calculating shadows for commerce, to the ruthless utility of the Great Wall, to the male physicists at CERN operating near absolute zero, the text argues that masculine energy built the chronological and physical architecture of the modern world.
A very clear thesis.
And because that architecture has been, in his view, hijacked by entropic social forces and extractive family courts, the modern man must radically, almost violently, disconnect from societal norms to reclaim his sovereignty.
He demands that you treat your calendar not as a schedule, but as a declaration of war.
Precisely. And this leaves us with a final provocative thought to mull over, building on the implications of Riker's manifesto. If history is truly written by those who control the clocks and build the structures, as Riker argues, what happens to a civilization when its most productive individuals, the engineers, the builders, the innovators, simply decide to opt out?
That's the big question.
What happens when they mentally, physically, and digitally secede into alpha mean time and refuse to participate in the happiness transfer? Does the entire system collapse under the weight of its own entropy? Or does the world simply find a way to rewrite the calendar once again?
It is a question that really makes you reevaluate your own agency every time you look at the clock on your wall. Are you using it as a tool, or are you trapped inside it? If this breakdown sparked your curiosity, or if you're looking to dive deeper into the history of our institutions and the manosphere's perspective on reclaiming them, you need to check out Time, Its Tides and Traditions by Conrad Riker.
It's definitely a wild ride.
You can buy the ebook right now on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books. Also, make sure to follow the author at Conrad Riker on Substack. And as always, please like and subscribe to this show so we can keep bringing you these deep dives. Until next time, keep a close eye on your watch.